It was in the early morning hours that three women would begin to make their way to the tomb. The last few days have been anything like they have experienced before, and they come to carry out a difficult, painful, and necessary task. Just a few days prior, they had watched the one who they had asked themselves, could he be the Savior? Could he be the one that we have longed for? The man who had given sight to the blind, healed the sick, even raised the dead. They had watched Jesus be tortured and killed. The time was short and the sun was setting and Passover was coming, and there wasn't time for a proper burial. There wasn't time for him to do the proper tasks to get him ready, and so he was hastily put into a tomb and the stone rolled in front. And now it's the first day of the week and they've come together. And I can imagine these women over the last few days have had little sleep, if any. They're weary, they're exhausted. Their grief is so great, their weariness so high, that they can't even rest. And they're approaching the tomb, and it says, as they come near the tomb, they notice that the stone has been rolled away. You know, it's pretty common that when after all the funeral stuff is over and the graveside service and the people have gone away, that a family might come back to a grave here. And they bring with them flowers. And they come to put those flowers upon the grave and to say their real and true final goodbyes. Can you imagine what it'd be like to come here to approach one of these graves, and as you're coming to try and finally bring what little closure is possible, as you approach, you notice that the dirt has been moved away. What pain that would hit you. What kind of injustice. Why now? As they're approaching and they see this, they have a sword must have pierced them to wonder why. Why the injustice? Was it not enough that they killed him? Was it not enough they handed him over to Rome? Now this? As they come to the tomb and they look inside, they see the linen cloths there, and before they could even ask themselves what it is, it says that two men came and stood beside them, and they looked like lightning. Fascinated by Luke's description that they look like lightning. Have you ever been out and about at night or been standing by your window and a lightning strike hits nearby, and that just blinding, overwhelming light that just hits you? It's light, yet it has this power that just infuses you, and it makes you want to dive to the ground. It makes you want to run all at the same time. And then there's that crash of thunder that just blows you over. And Luke says these two men came and they stood like lightning, and they looked like lightning. Can you imagine what that would have been like? And just the fear that gripped these women at the sight of this. And they said, don't be afraid. It says, why do you look for the living among the dead? What a strange question. What a strange rebuke. See, we are not looking for the living. We're looking for the dead. We're looking for Jesus, the one they killed. They say to them, he is not here, but he has been risen. He is alive. Could it really be this message? He is alive. Could it really be? It's beyond compare, this news that he is risen, that their Savior is alive. And they say, remember how he told you that the Son of Man must suffer and die, and be raised to life in 3 days? And you can imagine they say, no, but yes. It's true. It's what he said. It's just as he said. He is alive, and it's news beyond compare. News they cannot contain. They keep to themselves, and so they leave the tomb. They run. You can imagine they just drop their spices. I don't know, but they take off and they head and they go find the 11. Those disciples that had been with Jesus, those who were closest to him, and the other followers, and they said to him, "You're not going to believe what happened. We went to the tomb this morning. We went there with spices, and the tomb was open, but he's alive. He's alive." Incredibly, Luke says, the 11 heard their words and said, didn't believe them. No, he can't be alive. It just can't be true. You can see it. But wait a minute. Remember, he told us. He said he was going to be raised. These are, after all, only just women. Not ones worthy of carrying the message. Not ones worthy of speaking truth. So why would Jesus use women? Why would Jesus use people that are outcasts? Why would people use people that are of no value to carry his message? Peter, it says, though, he questioned. And he went and he ran into the tomb. And when he got to the tomb, he looked inside and he saw the burial cloth. And he wondered. But he still doubted. He did not believe that the message wasn't there for him. He was still looking for the dead among the dead. It was later that same day that Luke tells us that two men would be traveling from Jerusalem to the city of Emmaus, a distance of about 7 miles. And as they were walking along, they'd be joined by a third man who would ask them what they were talking about. They'd been discussing what had been happening in Jerusalem these last few days. The stories that they're discussing, seeing Jesus being crucified, and then hearing these stories of these women who had gone to the tomb and said that Jesus was alive and risen. None of it made any sense to them. They were surprised that this traveler who was with them didn't know what had happened. Could you be the only person in all Jerusalem who doesn't know what's been going on? It says this traveler who was with them began to describe to them and tell them all the law and the prophets and explain to them how it was that the Son of Man had to suffer and die. Why it is that his body had to be broken and be raised to life again in 3 days. His words were mysterious to them, words that they didn't understand. And as they finally reached their destination, this extra man began to prepare to go on, and they said, no, please stay with us, stay the night with us. We still have more questions. We've got to know more. It says as they sat down at a table to eat, Jesus would take bread and he'd break it and he'd bless it. And in that act of breaking the bread and blessing it, their eyes were opened. They realized that the man that had been walking with them this whole way was Jesus. He was alive. Then Jesus left them. Immediately they left their table and they got up and they raced back to Jerusalem to tell the disciples, Jesus is alive. He's alive. They've been looking for him among the dead, but they didn't even realize, nobody ever thought to look for him amongst the living. And here he was beside them. He's alive, they told his disciples. Can you imagine what it must have been like to be there in that room with the disciples as the stories began to flood in that day? As they heard the message of the women come and say that these two men proclaim that Jesus is risen, he is alive, he's no longer dead. To then hear later two men who are on the way to Emmaus, walking along a road, and to hear that they say they walked along the road with Jesus. Jesus explained to them why it is that the Son of Man had to suffer and die. Why it is that everything that happened as it did. Can you imagine what it must have been like? To ponder and to think back, Jesus had said that the Son of Man would have to suffer and die and be raised to life, but this wasn't at all. Yeah, they'd heard it, but yet they hadn't heard it, and now there it was in front of them. He's alive. Why was it that he had to suffer and die? Why is it that this day, even in the midst of a pandemic and a shutdown, we still celebrate the resurrection power and the life of Jesus Christ? You know, Jesus' death came because of humanity's turning and walking away from God. Because in a garden, in a place of creation, in a place of beauty, when God said it is good, it is very good, humanity said, no, we know better. We want to be God. We want to know, we want to do as you do, God. And they turned and walked away from him. And because they chose to disobey God, they brought sin and brokenness and death into humanity. They brought a brokenness that existed between humanity and God. As it tells us that they hid from God when he came, when before they used to be in this perfect relationship with him. They hid from each other, Adam and Eve, their shame and their sin. They realized that they were naked, not just without clothes, but they were exposed to each other. Their souls had been laid open. They didn't like what they saw. There was a brokenness within themselves, the guilt. Can you imagine what the weight must have been like? To go from a place of perfect relationship with God in this incredible environment and then to be driven from it because of a choice that they made, because they knew what they needed to do and what they should do, but yet they didn't do it. And then, of course, the broken relationship between humanity and creation. Once there was this Adam named the animals. They lived together in this incredible harmony. And now humanity and creation is broken. Why is it that Jesus had to die? He died to reconcile us. He decided to reconcile creation. And that's the invitation to us. But reconciliation requires the action of both parties. Jesus has died and he's been raised to life that we might be restored in our relationship with him, that we might have our shame taken, that we might know forgiveness, that we might be filled with his resurrection power and life in our bodies. But he's made the way, but he invites us. There's a book of the Bible, Hosea, and Hosea is a strange book in many ways. Hosea is a prophet, and God has said to Hosea, go and marry a prostitute. That alone is perhaps strange enough, but yet the woman that he marries is unfaithful to him. She keeps running back to her lovers, keeps running back to her old life, and Hosea keeps having to go back and to draw her back. As much as Hosea forgives his wife, the relationship that he has with his wife cannot be restored until she comes as well and receives his forgiveness, till she comes and perhaps forgives him for his choices, but she comes to him. God has made a way. He has reconciled our relationship with him. He has made a way that our relationship with each other might be restored. He has made a way that we would be whole and complete, fully who he desired and desires and designed us to be. But we have to take the step. We have to receive. We have to choose to turn and walk off the path that we have been walking. Turn away from looking for the dead to look for the living, to receive what he's given to us. This day is an invitation, a day to receive the life that he's given to us. In the midst of all that is going on, and all the fear and the anxiety, we as the people of God declare with hope, because we know that God is making all things new. We can look what looks like death. We can look at what looks like without hope, and we can see hope, because we know that our Savior has come to reconcile all of creation. And our work today is to go and to live as people of his kingdom, to live as ones who are reconciling broken relationships, to live healing the relationships between men and women and each other, to live healing the relationships between each and ourselves, to live as ones healing and declaring the good news and the healing of a relationship with humanity. And of course, healing our relationship with creation. Haven't we seen such beauty in the healing now in this time? Today is a day, an invitation to you to come, to turn from the path that you are on, and to follow Jesus, to be reconciled to him, to be able to declare today, he is alive. And I know that he is alive, and his resurrection power is at work in my life. It is infusing me like lightning and giving me life for this day. Would you receive his life and his power today? Because he is alive.